Hello, welcome to Old School Movies Podcast, where I, Nora, your host, will share my reviews on some old but gold box office hits in the late 1990s and early 2000s. Rest assured that I will try not to spoil much of their golden details, so that you can sit back and enjoy them later. For this episode, let's dive into my top 2 movies that exceptionally portray different aspects of love in war. Growing up with grandma's stories about her youth living in war, I'm fascinated by how brave and resilient people were back then to regain the nation's independence and even build the country through the war aftermath. But what impresses me the most is that Grandma and some of her peers even managed to find love amid those poor circumstances. I once thought that love derived from such agonies is so inspirational. It proves that this special intimacy still exists in time, regardless of shapes and sizes, as long as people have a will and desire for it. However, sad but true, not all love could survive through the harsh reality. The euphoria of this relationship sometimes didn't last long like what it is often depicted in novels or fiction. So what I'm going to introduce today are the movies that successfully depict beautiful but very realistic sad love stories during the peak time of wars. And through today's sharing, I hope that I can give you some understanding of how love sometimes shaped itself in erratic but very logical ways. If you've been an enthusiastic fan of classic war romance movies, I believe that you're quite familiar with Gone with the Wind, an epic achievement of Hollywood in its golden era of 1930s. Or Atonement, which depicts a heartbroken relationship while re-illustrating real-life events during World War II. But what I'm going to tell you is neither of those. For me, apart from its precise storytelling of a real-life battle on the Pacific, this movie manages to describe an art in love during war. If you are guessing, I hope that the clue I gave was just enough for you. Yes, I'm talking about Pearl Harbour, a 2001 American romantic war film directed by Michael Bay. While retelling the Japanese forces' attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941, and the subsequent Doolittle campaign of the American, the film weaves in a complicated relationship among 3 main characters. Rafe McCauley and Danny Walker, the first lieutenant pilots under the command of Major Jimmy Doolittle. They are childhood friends, grow up together, living in a dream of becoming fighting airmen. During a medical checkup for the armed forces, the duo first meet Evelyn Johnson, a Navy nurse, who decides to close one eye on Rafe's dyslexia and passes medical exam. Since then, Rafe is hooked on Evelyn. 4 weeks later, they become a couple deeply in love. However, their enjoyment doesn't last for too long. Rafe shocks Evelyn, saying that he officially joins the Eagle Squadron and will be away the next day for a duty in Great Britain. Shortly later, Danny and Evelyn get transferred to Pearl Harbor. As for Rafe, during a mission to intercept a Luftwaffe bombing raid, his aircraft is shot down over the English Channel, and he is deemed deceased, though his remains aren't found. Back in Hawaii, both Danny and Evelyn mourn Rafe's death, which later spurs a romance between them. But on the 6th of December, one night before the actual attack on Pearl Harbor, Rafe returns to the Hawaiian base, shocking Evelyn that he survived his drowning and months of being captivated in Nazi-occupied zone in France. Sadly, he exposed to Danny and Evelyn's ongoing romantic affairs. The bromance between Danny and Rafe collapses. They become enemies afterwards. Not until the turmoil of Pearl Harbor and the following retaliation campaigns of the American do the two reconcile. The first time I watched this film, I was amazed by the effects adopted in the early 2000s to construct the real fighting scene in the Pacific with bomb raids and combat aircrafts. However, the portrayal of such a complicated relationship left me less than impressed at first. I wasn't very accepting of such a love triangle displaying unfaithful acts. I was a bit critical of Evelyn's shift in her affection for Rafe to Danny. But looking back, in some aspects, I feel sympathetic for what both Danny and Evelyn go through. There must be some emotional turbulence faced by those left behind during war. For Evelyn, it was the loss of her boyfriend, and it was also a loss of a good brother for Danny. The scenario that the film dramatized does have a basis in reality. The strain of separation, uncertainty, and the painful loss of loved ones can lead individuals to seek comfort and companionship, sometimes resulting in unfaithful acts. Evelyn does struggle with her feelings. She seems to be torn between her love for Rafe and the new bond with Danny. This situation, I think a bit morally complex, can be understood as an illustration of how harsh the realities of war can disrupt personal relationships. In other words, during such tumultuous times, people may find themselves drawn to those who provide emotional support and understanding, even if it means compromising their commitments. All in all, for me, it's a movie worth watching, as it's first a unique blend of romance and war, wrapped in a visually spectacular presentation. The movie successfully brought to light such a hidden aspect of love during the time of war, around the 1940s, which, to some extent, still resonates with today's reality. I used to think that it was important to stay loyal and be at the highest commitment to any relationship. However, through this movie, I'm no longer 100% sure that I can absolutely control the unexpected affection for another person if I'm in the same circumstance as Evelyn. The pain the war brings to life is tremendous, physically and mentally. The question is whether we're strong enough to protect our dignity and withstand the hardship, or should we lean on someone else available for us to move on? And should this unfaithful act be considered exceptionally acceptable during hard times like war? I believe that you may somehow have a response to yourself through watching this movie. As promised, I won't delve further into my thoughts on the love story depicted in the film, allowing you the space to explore and interpret different aspects of this movie on your own. With that, I'll conclude my first review and move on to my second recommended war romance film. Luckily born in the 2000s, I didn't really go through wars. My impression of such events was only from history classes and sometimes literature classes. I learned about different key battles in the war's timeline, how tremendous this agony was on any nations, both the invaders and the colonized, and also how patriotism or the faithfulness to one's nation played a key role in solidifying the country and together overcoming such hardship. But I didn't really get to know how people sustained their daily lives during war. Did everything only revolve war? Did they still try to carry on the usual activities in life? Or did they still have time and mind for personal desires such as passion, dreams, and love? All those curiosities led me to Le Silence de la Mer, or The Silence of the Sea, where I got a cinematic exposure to life during World War II in France, and also a unique illustration of the romance with the enemy, which was hidden but quite common by then. Le Silence de la Mer is a French-Belgian movie directed by Pierre Boutron in 2004, based on the 1942 book of the same name by Jean Brulaire. The movie depicts life in a French village during the Nazi occupation in 1941, while interweaving a sad love story between Wagner von Epernack, a captain of Wehrmacht, which is a unified armed forces of Nazi Germany, and Jean Lachaussière, a young French piano teacher. Wagner requisitions the house of Jeanne and her grandpa as his lodging. It is also where they both first meet, to show loyalty to France and hostility to the German occupation. Jeanne and her grandpa keep their mouths shut all the time staying with Wagner. Despite such awkward silence, the officer who speaks perfect French unreluctantly shares his passion for France with the host. Jeanne tries to ignore Wagner, but she soon becomes infatuated with him. I would say that you cannot forget this movie once you watch it, and you even cannot find any other movies that share the same vibe like this. Though set in an occupied zone, the movie tells different life's angles not on the violence of bombs and guns, but on the complex human emotions and relationships that unfold in the shadow of war. Through the character of Captain Wagner, the film offers a different perspective on the German soldiers, showing that not all were fierce and ruthless. He is portrayed as a cultured and sensitive man, who is deeply conflicted about the war and his role in it. His quiet and reflective demeanor contrasts sharply with the stereotypical image of the brutal invader, reminding viewers that soldiers on all sides of the conflict were human beings with their own struggles and pain. The film also delves into the mixed feelings of the youth at that time, especially Jeanne, who is torn between her duty to her country and the unexpected bond she forms with the enemy. This complex dynamic captures the emotional turmoil of those who found themselves in impossible situations, where love and loyalty were often at odds. The restrained performances and the minimalist setting enhance the film's themes of silent resistance and the quiet dignity of the human spirit in the face of adversity. Overall, it is a subtle, yet profound exploration of the impact of war on the human heart, offering a fresh perspective on the experiences of both the invaders and the occupied. It reminds us that, even in the midst of conflict, there can be moments of understanding, compassion, and even love. Although Le Silence de la Mer 2004 is a beautifully crafted and emotionally resonant film, it remains somewhat underrated, despite its powerful narrative and unique approach to depicting life during wartime. The film has not received the widespread recognition it deserves. Its subtlety and focus on the quieter, more introspective aspects of war might not appeal to all audiences, which could contribute to its underappreciation. However, for those who appreciate nuanced storytelling and character-driven dramas, this film offers a rich and rewarding experience that lingers long after the credits roll. War tests the limits of human resilience, but it also reveals the complexity of love in the most unexpected ways. Through the stories of Pearl Harbour and Le Silence de la Mer, we see that even in the darkest time, love can emerge in forms that challenge our understanding of loyalty, morality, and the human spirit. These films remind us that love in all its facets is as much a part of human experience during war as fear, loss, and survival. As you explore these thematic portrayals, I hope you find a deeper appreciation for the nuanced realities of love in the time of war through these movies. So that's the end of my sharing today. I hope you enjoyed today's episode and found it interesting. For your convenient reference to the historic events I mentioned, please find the links to my blog page in the description, where I have compiled all the related information. If you have any questions or you want to discuss more on what I shared today, please leave your comments below. I would like to talk to each of you more as well. You can search for more episodes of this Old School Movies podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and my own blog page. Thank you for listening to today's episode all the way to the end. And I hope to see you again in my next episode of Old School Movies, which will be released soon. Once again, this is Nora, your host. Thank you so much and goodbye.